Welcome to On the Brink, a fresh lens to take you and your business to new heights. Hi, I'm Andi Simon, and as you know, we put on these podcasts and sometimes a video so that you can see, feel, and think in new ways about what's happening all around you and maybe change your organization to adapt to these fast-changing times. I'm so excited to have with me today Marton Ven. Marton is from Tay Food. He's a chief marketing officer there. And I want you to tell him to tell you about blockchain, how it's being applied to the food industry, and what it could mean for you, both as a consumer to know where your food came from, and as a producer to make sure your food gets to the right place in the right way. Marton, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Hi, Andrea.
Could you tell the listener a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go right into our podcast today.
Yes. My name is Marton Ven. I'm CMO of Tay Food. Tay Food is a farm-to-table fresh food traceability solution on blockchain. And we employ modern technologies like blockchain, like AI, and mobile technologies to provide an affordable solution, mostly for emerging or mostly focusing in emerging countries, to provide transparency in the food supply chain and mitigation of food frauds and the contaminations. And what we do is farm-to-table fresh food traceability. That means that we follow the food items throughout the whole supply chain. Tay Food is a top-to-bottom solution. That means that we provide every tools which needed for the companies, for the food companies to track the food. We integrate the food supply chain companies, we integrate consumers, and we can integrate authorities as well into this ecosystem. We provide the physical identification materials. I mean these plastic security seals which have QR codes to identify the tracked items. So because food traceability is in fact real life based, so there has to be a gateway between the real world and the digital world, and these QR codes are one technology to provide that. Another technology is RFID, the radio frequency identification, but that has a lot of advantages to QR code, but it's a very expensive technology. Even today, also it's a more than 20 years old technology, and so we stick with the QR codes, and we provide also mobile apps for the food companies, and we also provide mobile apps for the consumers. So if they go to the retail store, or if they go to a market, before they buy the product, they can scan the QR code on it and read the history of the food. What makes us a bit different from some other companies, it's we don't just track logistics information or information about logistics, but also about food quality and later financial settlements. But that we will get there later, because in blockchain this is a problematic area, the financial settlements. So logistic and food quality, what does it mean? It means that our system has two big parts. One is we call it in-farm traceability. So if we speak about an animal, if we speak about produce, they start on a farm, and the farmers start to identify themselves individually or by lot or a bunch of items, and start to enter information about cultivation or use of antibiotics or feeding and so on, illnesses, vaccinations, and when it's time, they harvest it, or they create a transport and send to slaughter in case of animals, and then start the logistics, the tracking the logistics, that company A sent a transport of 20 pigs to slaughterhouse B, and there was a veterinary check, and the logistics take that time, and basically this line continues until it enters the retail store, and it's sold to consumers. And consumers have access, transparent access to the whole information. But this is not only for consumers. Many times consumers are not interested in the food history. There are special use cases when they are, for example, in many emerging countries where yearly 400,000 people die because of contaminated foods or food frauds, and most of them are children. So that's why there is a use case for that. But if you think about, for example, halal food or kosher food, those consumers are naturally interested in to know the source of the food, if it comes from a reputable source, and along the requirements of the halal method or kosher method. But there are other use cases as well. The most natural use case you would think of is a use case, or is a motivation of a government which wants to provide transparent access to this information, and wants to mitigate the food frauds. But in reality, this use case is in most time it's not enough. But luckily, more and more countries implement import regulations, requirements regarding imported food products, and many of them, the United States, the European Union, China, Japan, implements for more and more food types import regulations that they want to know the traceability information of the food they import. They want to know the proof of origin. If it's I don't know, if it's an Australian cattle or an Australian beef, then it has to be proved that it's from really Australia. And the other one which they are interested in is a food quality related information. If the animal of the produce was treated by antibiotics or pesticides which are forbidden in the importing country. They want to filter out, of course, those products which were in the process they used materials which are forbidden. So this use case, I think this will be the real motivation all globally, because there are many contaminations and many people die because of food, bad food, and it didn't really change in the last, I don't know, 20 years. And while in one hand we send cars to the space or build robots to replace our jobs, and on the other hand, 400,000 people die each year because of bad food, and we don't know how to mitigate it. And I think that is the motivation of governments to implement these import regulations. And this will be a very good use case, because companies and countries which want to export to these countries will implement food traceability.
Martin, for our listeners and our viewers, explain what blockchain does, why it eliminates the ability to fraud it or to not be completely transparent or accurate. In the absence of knowing what blockchain is, it sounds like a big mystery, but it's actually a very powerful way of ensuring that the beef you're getting from Wyoming is grass-fed and you're actually getting that beef when you're importing it. Tell them about what is blockchain.
Yes. So there are two things to speak about. What blockchain is today and what blockchain will be in 10 years or 15 years.
Absolutely.
For us, we started in 2015 in Vietnam to implement our system, and as a centralized solution. So it's not blockchain based, it's a cloud-based database which maintains the ledger, the traceability ledger, and it works well, like it works in many cases. But the problem was that the distrust in the food industry is so big amongst the companies that many times we heard rumors that we might be able to change the data in favor of the large companies. Of course, just like everywhere in the world, in Vietnam as well, the decent percentage of the market is acquired by large companies. And in fact, technically, we would be able to modify data in a centralized database in favor of large companies. Although I have to emphasize that we never did that, and we were never asked for it. But it shows the distrust in this industry that there were a lot of rumors about it. And in Vietnam, in some cases, it's important question because for many food types there is no cold chain. That means there is no refrigerated chain of transporting or storing the meat, and that's why the meat has to be sold. They slaughter it during the night. It has to be sold in the morning. So when it was slaughtered, it's a very important information, and it has to be verified. So that's why in the beginning of 2016, we started to think how to prove that the information we provide is genuine and is verified, and what process or what technology should we establish for it. And we found blockchain before the hype around blockchain, and we started to experiment it. So basically now for us, blockchain means that it can be verified, that the information in it is not tampered by anyone. It doesn't mean that the information is correct, because if someone, I don't know, in Vietnam sells, I don't know, a fake Australian beef, the system cannot tell if the information is right or wrong. So in a supply chain, there has to be certain checkpoints, which there are, governmental veterinaries or veterinaries employed by a slaughterhouse or a food producer. There are such checkpoints which take random samples and analyze it. So what we can make in this case, that we can make them easier to trace back the information to where it became fraudulent, so who provided the fake information. So this system can make harder or more difficult to make food frauds. But in this form currently, it doesn't, it mitigates it, but doesn't prevent it totally. So for this, and I refer it to the other what I told, that blockchain, what blockchain will be in 10 years or 15 years. So blockchain on its own cannot prove it. It needs other technologies, and I refer here to AI and IoT as technologies which will help together to provide a trusted network for the food. I mean that with IoT devices we will be able to prove that the cold chain was intact, or the truck which transports the animals from A to B was not stopped. We have now some preliminary tools for it. For example, it was a common fraud that people, when they transferred animals from a farm to a slaughterhouse, they stop it midway and inject the pigs with sedatives, so they will not be nervous, and their meat quality will be better. But since their meat will be on the markets in the morning, that sedative will be in the meat, and people will consume it. So we have preliminary tools to measure that the time from farm A to slaughterhouse B takes 2 hours, and if this route was 3 hours, then we can notify the veterinary of the slaughterhouse that he has to investigate this transport because something is not okay with it. But with proper IoT tools and artificial intelligence applied to it, we will be able to tell these patterns much more, much better. So it will be possible to make a much better supply chain verification and control. And regarding blockchain, today we use blockchain only as a transaction ledger. In the future, we will use it for much more because blockchain can do much more, but simply the technology itself is not ready for that, and the regulation is not ready for that. So to use blockchain and cryptocurrencies are very much bound to provide a revolutionary solution, because with cryptocurrencies you can enter or you can introduce the financial settlement side to all transactions. But today it has a lot of regulatory limits to use cryptocurrencies as a means of payment. But I think in 10 years or 15 years, this will be totally different, and we will see food supply chains which will be start with automatic contracts between a buyer and the supplier and other parties, like logistics services or quality control services, automatically contracted with each other. There will be IoT devices employed which will control if the quality of the transport is according to the contract, and there will be automatic loans to finance the transaction, and they will automatically make automatic settlements between each other through cryptocurrencies. But this is a vision now.
But it's capable, because quite frankly, it isn't that far from possible, where you could have a smart contract, and you'll make sure that the beef that's coming from Campstool Ranch in Wyoming is the farm-raised beef that you want, and you'll pay for it by an exchange when it arrives at the foreign market where it's supposed to come. And along the entire way, you'll know it hasn't gotten unnecessary sedatives or other things that are supposed to not be put into the cows. And everything will then be exchanged on a blockchain, and no banks need apply. It will be interesting.
Yes, it will be an interesting use case regarding beef chain, or the Wyoming use case. It's for them. It's very important that in those countries where they exporting their beef, there is a food tampering. So they because the Wyoming beef is a quality and premium product, then it's a certain thing that certain market players want to tamper it with fake Wyoming beef. So blockchain acts for them as a proof of origin, which people scan the QR code, and they can see in which ranch the cattle lived, and what it was fed, how it was vaccinated. They even can see pictures about the farm and how the animals moved, and they can see a proof that the premium they pay for that is valid, and they don't pay a premium for a fake product.
I did notice in your timeline that you're moving into eggs and fish, and I wasn't sure, how do you tag an egg, or how do you tag a fish? And I'm curious about how you're getting it past the stuff I could understand. Although I know IBM has a project in there, blockchaining diamonds and putting codes into plastic for a not-for-profit that's trying to use plastic as currency and get it out of the oceans. How do you do eggs and fish?
So the identification doesn't necessarily has to be an individual product. In case of eggs, it's a box of eggs, which is the smallest unit of traceability. In many times, the individual identification is not important, because if there is a lot where there are 100 chickens in it, they are fed with the same feeding, they are vaccinated at the same time, they treated with antibiotics at the same time. So it doesn't necessarily important to know that the chicken leg in your food package you buy at the retail store from exactly which chicken it originates. The thing which is important, that from which farm it comes, and in which transport it was at the farm. And it's not only important for you as a consumer, it's important for the retail as well, because think about the Roman lettuce scandal in the United States in December and in March, I think in this year. Or even the fipronil egg scandal in the European Union, or the horse meat in the UK. So, in average, it took 3-4 weeks to define the source of the contamination.
Yes.
In these cases, and it's a very long one, and it's one of the reasons why there are so many illnesses from these contaminations. But in case of and the normal procedure in this case that until they cannot tell from which farm the contaminated food originated, they establish a full-scale recall of these food items. So it's a cause of a huge loss for the retailers and the food producers as well. So in case of a traceability system like T-Food in Vietnam, if there is a contamination and the food safety agency found that which product was contaminated, then it takes 2 seconds to trace back to the farm, and another 1 minute to create a report which tells you that that food products originated from that farm in that time and the similar time, in which retail stores there are products from that same shipment.
Yes, and
so
you'll actually know which ones they are because they'll all be tagged in some fashion. So
exactly.
that mix and match, you know exactly what the code is, you know which ones to pull, and you don't have to destroy others. How interesting.
Exactly. You can make targeted recalls.
Martin, we've been talking about looking forward, and the timeline is 10 years or so, but I have a hunch that you're onto some things that are coming out quickly next. You know, for T-Food, what do you see are the next most important kinds of innovations that others can be looking at as important coming next?
So I think that for us, the way forward is to beside the business achievements, so rolling out the system, implementing new food types, because we make a food quality as well, so not just logistics. Then therefore we make different processes, different data sets for each food type. So it's nature that or obvious that a pig traceability process is different from a fish or a melon or something like that. So for us, beside this, the important thing is to establish IoT tools in the process, which can automate a lot of verifications. So, for example, a smart scale. There is a built-in function in the system which prevents the food supply chain participants that they bought 1,000 kilograms of beef to sell 2,000 kilograms from the same ship transport, but they have to measure it and enter the weight all during the way. It requires manual data entry. In the future, all of these data entries will be automatic. The weight, the environmental conditions, the quality analyzations, all these will be automatic because it will make these solutions easier and cheaper. But as I told, it needs time, because it's a good example. I think that in the 90s there were already smartphones. If you think about the Nokia communicator or something like that. But it's not an accident that Steve Jobs only came out with the iPhone in 2007, because the technology needed to mature and to handle such use cases they provided. So in this case, the technology also needs to mature, and it will take 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, I don't know, but it will take a couple of years till until the people and the regulators will realize the opportunities. As of now, we are speaking about these automatic blockchain-based and smart contract-based supply chains, which with automatic payments and measurements. But in reality, when we are talking about blockchain for an average food company, they just see like this and ask, is it similar like Bitcoin? And that's a long education time to adopt.
Well, and that's where we started our conversation today, because as I speak to CEOs across the country, they say, you got to talk about blockchain. And they said, we don't know what it is. And yet they don't really know. They're a little behind the curve, but they know enough. It's time to get on it. But I think what's important in what you just said is it isn't just the blockchain and the security that can come from a connection like this, where the city of Zug in Switzerland wants to be completely on blockchain, or even you do your tax returns on your blockchain and you control all of your information. Dubai wants to be completely on blockchain. And you scratch your head and you say, what does that mean to be completely paperless with you controlling all of your information? Or putting healthcare systems on blockchain so that the consumer has all of their information on one chain that connects to yours when it's needed, and they only release what is necessary. And people's eyes roll, but it's not far from what's possible. And it's going to solve some really big problems about security, transparency, control, information, not just currency. And currency has become the hype, but quite frankly, I think blockchain tied in with artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, the way in which our expectations are changing about what we know, about what's happening, it's going to be transformative. And so today's conversation has been absolutely exciting. Some last thoughts. If they want to reach you, Marton, how could they? And how could they find out more about HeyFood and how it could help them?
Thank you. I think that the best way to start is our website. It's te-food.com. And we have a blog as well, where we speak about the progress we make, even the Wyoming use case you told, or the Halal use case, or different other pilots we make, or the progress we make in Vietnam, and also our views about what the future holds regarding food traceability and blockchain. And I think this information can be interesting for those who want to know more about us.
I think they all are going to want to know more about you. The website, by the way, is very explanatory. I love the timeline. It gives you a picture of what's happened and what's coming next. Unfortunately, your videos are in Vietnamese, and I wasn't able to watch them, but you can see what's happening. It is a few subtitles underneath would help me, but it's very exciting. And the Wyoming story is particularly interesting because they changed in their state laws enough to get around the regulations, to allow them to do something of great value for the Wyoming cattle raisers. And it's not just for one, it's going to be pretty ubiquitous. There's something coming very powerful, and it was very exciting. Thank you all for joining us today. Marton, thank you for giving us the time. It's been a marvelous conversation. I'm so excited to share it. For those of you who come to us often, remember Ask Andi's are answers to your questions, and I'm anxious to hear your questions on this. This came out of somebody's question, and we went searching for the right answers. We have several more podcasts coming up about the application of blockchain to supply chains and to other types of industries. And it's coming soon to a neighborhood near you. Thanks again for joining us. And if you need us at simonassociates.net or andysimon.com. Remember, On the Brink by Andy Simon is the podcast, and thanks for listening to us today.